Welcome to the Winter 2025 webinar of the section on Teaching Statistics in the Health Sciences of the American Statistical Association. I am Jaya Satagopan, Professor of Biostatistics at Rutgers School of Public Health in Piscataway, New Jersey, USA. I'm also the chair of the 2025 portion of the TSHS section. The topic of today's webinar panel is using AI for teaching statistics in health sciences. Before we dive into our webinar, I encourage you all to explore the TSHS section's website, blog, and resource portal. The links and QR codes are shown here on the screen. These are all valuable hubs filled with teaching materials, data sets, and innovative approaches to enhancing statistics education. And these resources are designed to support and inspire your teaching. Let us begin by welcoming our panelists. Dr. Christine R. Carey is Senior Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the Celia Scott Weatherhead School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine at Tulane University, New Orleans, USA. In her role as Senior Associate Dean, Dr. R. Carey works with faculty and students to navigate the use of AI in education. Welcome, Dr. R. Carey. Dr. Jay Klopper is Teaching Associate Professor of Biostatistics and Bioinformatics at Millikan Institute School of Public Health in George Washington University, Washington, D.C., USA. In addition to being a statistics educator, Dr. Klopper is also a qualified surgeon and former head of acute care surgery unit in the University of Cape Town, fully immersed in health sciences in many ways. Dr. Klopper writes extensively about AI in academia through his university's blog pages. His take on AI, there is no escaping it. Welcome, Dr. Klopper. Dr. Justin Post is Teaching Professor and Director of Statistics Online Education in the Department of Statistics, North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina, in USA. His interests include exploring how AI can be integrated into statistics curricula and rethinking traditional assessments. At the 2024 Joint Statistical Meetings, Dr. Post delivered a well-attended talk on using generative AI to enhance learning in statistical programming courses, redefining how we teach the next generation of statisticians. Welcome, Dr. Post. Let us get started with our panel discussion. AI is significantly transforming the way we teach in the health sciences, especially in many ways. For example, by enhancing personalization, we now have AI-driven adaptive learning platforms like Coursera and DataCamp. AI allows automating complex analyses, for example, by allowing students to work with complex simulations and machine learning models. And AI is also helping improve accessibility to real-world data. For example, AI allows students to work with large-scale electronic health record data and genomics data and clinical trials data. So let's begin by asking our panelists, what are the most promising AI tools currently being used in statistics education? Dr. Klopper, would you like to take this?
Definitely like to take that. I think it's almost too difficult to to come up with a solution to a question like this because there just seems to be a new tool being released every day. I tried to get, for instance, on yesterday's Claude 3.5 Sonnet or the Claude Code, but I was too late, so I'm on the waiting list for that. It just goes so quickly. So for me, I think there's a lot of innovative tools, and at the moment, for me, the big struggle is just trying to keep up with these. I've actually got a list that I think we might be able to talk about later. But as far as transforming the education is concerned, I think it has allowed us to move from a very rote form of mathematical education. I'm going to lump this all into, some kind of STEM education, to getting more back to more of the era of exploration. And I love that comparison to how we learned something new when we were kids, and we just explored and we had this fascination. And I'm always almost in that, in that sense of thinking that we are back in that sort of exciting phase. And I definitely see that reflecting in the eyes of some of the students. There is a range of students, some who use it and some who don't, and I'm sure we'll discuss that. But certainly there's a subset of these students that just seem to me to have, in them at least, it's rekindled this idea of free exploration, which wasn't really available with a very static textbook or a very static whiteboard or blackboard in the front of our lecture halls. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Klopper. Anybody else? Dr. Post? Dr.
Sure, I can chime in a little bit. So I agree with Dr. Klopper on the use of it to sort of explore things. So one thing that I try to teach my students to think about generative AI for is as an idea generator. So something that can help you think about, oh, what kind of analyses could I do on this data set? Or what might I be interested in exploring here? Where could I go further with this? And it can just give you some ideas. It might not be right. Some of the ideas might be terrible, some of them might be great, but it gives you this sort of place to just go and have a sounding board that can spit back things that might spark your interest or get you going. And then I do a lot of teaching of coding, so particularly through R and Python. And Copilot has been really great because it's a great way to sort of make it so you can conceptualize what you're trying to do with code. So we talk about things like there's like 6 data moves that you might do, like creating a new variable, filtering a data set, those kinds of things. And if you can get the concepts of those data moves down, you can now get those basic things to be done and written for you without worrying too much about the syntax that you have to actually code with. And so I think that's been a real game changer for a lot of the intro programming stuff.
Yeah, and I just like to add that I think AI is a total game changer in education. And I think it's really important that we think about AI and teaching and learning in 2 distinct ways. And the first way is that we have to teach our students how to use AI as a tool for learning and how they should be using responsibly AI in an academic setting. And we also have to teach our students how to use AI as a tool for doing. Because our students are now going to be entering a workforce where they will need to use AI to do their job. And I think those are really 2 different distinct goals that we have. My interest, my work right now has really been in that first goal. But I think the second one is extraordinarily important. And it's going to take a lot of work by us that teach in this area to get on top of it and stay on top of it so we know how to teach our students to actually use AI in their jobs.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about pedagogical benefits and challenges that AI brings with it. How do you think AI can help students grasp complex statistical concepts, especially those who have little prior background in mathematics?
I'll chime in first here on this one.
You go, Justin.
I was just going to say, I think the one big thing that allows them to do is ask clarification questions. So if there's something mathematically, they can say, what is this? What does this beta term represent here? What does it mean? And it will tell you, it will give you some ideas about it, and then they can keep asking further and further questions. So it's that sort of ability to have a conversation with the AI that they might not feel comfortable doing in front of a class or something like that. I think that's a really big benefit for helping students that might struggle with seeing those formulas, not really understanding what they are, but feeling too nervous to say, those symbols are confusing for me.
Yes, I was going to chime in with that, just to reiterate, just to give students a space during the lecture, to give them space to do that exploration. That's a bit difficult because the sage on the stage kind of mindset that we do have, you have to change that. And for me, it's beautiful to change because I really didn't think that is a good way to educate anyone by that formula. But to give the students a little bit of space to do that exploration and to to get them to tell us what that exploration is. We have a variety of tools and programs that we have at the moment where we are joining with the students, where the prompts that they write are visible to us, and that we will do research on that, all IRB approved, etc., all these programs that we are running, but to give that students a little bit of space to do that exploration, not only at home, which they are going to do anyway. AI is available to everyone everywhere, and there's no way to police that when they're at home, but especially also in the lecture hall. And Justin said something exciting for me as well, and that's perhaps the use of GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio Code, for instance, using notebooks, which even before AI has really revolutionized the way that I would instruct on data analysis and biostatistics. But now, with GitHub Copilot right inside of Visual Studio Code, I think that for me is just a beautiful way to introduce a very wide spectrum of people, from those who hate mathematics, hate statistics, really don't want to deal with that, to ones that are interested in it, but this is just not their day job. Maybe their day job is in the clinical sciences or in other aspects of healthcare, but it just opens it up. For me, it opens it up to a whole spectrum of students, which before was more of a struggle.
Thank you. Is it fair to say then that AI can be a useful and important tool to get them to be more and more curious at their own comfort zone or at their own pace?
Yeah, I agree.
How,
Go ahead, Chris.
go ahead.
I was to say, a strength for me for the use of AI is personalized learning. And, you mentioned in the beginning, Jay, about adaptive learning platforms that are out there. They're being developed specifically now for statistics. And that's really like a lot of bells and whistles layered on top of the AI, and they come at a price. But there's also ways to get that kind of same experience without going and paying for these platforms as well. And one of the places, and that you can help your students teach them how to use AI for this purpose, is with tutoring assistants. And again, this can be set up for free using ChatGPT and other LLMs, and creating study guides, providing quiz questions, responding to student questions, and having AI provide feedback. And I think it's a really useful tool. It's a tool for lifelong learning and teaching your students how to do that. Of course, there's challenges and considerations that come with that, but really important AI is going to be for teaching in the future.
Did anyone have to add anything to that, or shall we move on to the next topic? Yeah. So how effective is AI for tailoring statistics education to specific needs of individual students?
I think it can be very effective, and this is where it's where you need to practice as the course instructor, where you need to use AI and practice with AI to see how best to model that use with your students. And particularly with the area of tutoring and assistance, there's different prompts that you can write to kind of set up a tutoring bot within your course system. And there's different ways you can, information you can put in that prompt. Go, Google, ask ChatGPT, what kind of prompt can I set up for tutoring assistance for my students? Let ChatGPT show you, test it out, and roll it out to your students. Again, there's challenges with this of using ChatGPT as a tutor. I mean, one of the big advantages are it's there 24/7. If they want to work on their homework, if they have a question at 2 a.m., they're not, going to be emailing you at 2 a.m. and at 9 a.m. you're getting an email saying, why haven't you responded yet, right? So they have 24-hour access to this type of assistance. But of course, students, can generate answers without really understanding the concepts. The more difficult the concept, the more likely that AI might not be able to grasp the nuances of the statistical reasoning behind it or the real world applications. But this comes to, one of my major messages is that faculty need to be involved. AI is a starting point only, right? AI should never be the final point. You're trying to get a student from point A to point B. AI comes in at point A, never at point B. And that's something that we really need to teach our students. It's not a replacement for critical thinking.
A good point. Thank you. Yeah. And on that note, like, does AI level the playing field by guiding all students in gaining and improving their knowledge in statistics, or does AI risk widening the gaps?
I think I'll go out on a limb here and say I do see some indication that it might be widening the gap if you look at it from a certain point of view. As I mentioned, there's a spectrum for me of students who are just those early adopters, they're on top of it. And I think one of the big dangers here is if we go and make the assumption that it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at something, which of course, that's a improper assumption to make. None of us have 10,000 hours, not the students, neither do we. It's kind of a very interesting time where there's this, there's a big gap between the knowledge and experience of a lecturer versus or professor and a student, and that's just the way that education used to be set up. And we find ourselves with this new dynamic where all the student and the teacher, we both got to learn about AI at the same time, and it's very difficult to differentiate your knowledge and experience from that of the students. Sometimes they might even be ahead of you. So I think it's very difficult at the moment to call yourself an expert in it. I certainly sort of never want to do that. This is a great experimentation. There's a great experiment. Now, we've been through many experiments in education. We went through the MOOC, the Massive Open Online Course, and everything goes online, and then the experiment with the global pandemic, etc. We've been through experimentation with that, but this is, I would call, a grand experimentation. And the problem is we don't know the solutions yet. It's also a moving target because, as I mentioned, a brand new model came out yesterday from everything I've been watching. As I had a little bit of gaps in between my meetings and lectures today, it seems to be astonishing, the Claude Code model that is out now. So there's a moving target, a target that we're trying to research because we need to understand how this is impacting the students. And I think we're sort of in a great difficult time in that, because I do find, I don't know if that's the experience of everyone, but I do still find the student who just comes to me and says, what's going to be in the exam and how must I write it in the exam? That old-fashioned form of education that we put a high bar at the end, and if you don't jump over that bar, you fail. By the time we get to that bar and we test you whether you can jump over that bar, it's too late to do anything about it. There's all those well-known problems in education. But I do fear there is always going to be the student who still just wants that. Give me the formula. Where do I plug in stuff? What format you wanted in the exam? And it's just that focus on the exam. And it's almost, in my experience at the moment, I don't have enough numbers to make this bold claim, but I do feel there are those students who just don't want to engage with AI at the moment. They are busy students. They have a lot on their plate. To get them to spend some extra time in this exploration might not always be possible, and certainly not possible for all of them. And that's why I'm slightly concerned of a gap.
Thanks, Jay, for the great points.
Yeah, I'd agree that it does worry me a little bit. I had some high school students come in to do like a data visualization workshop, and there were some of them that while we were doing it, they would have the AI up and they would be getting code to make their visualization very quickly. And I was thinking, some of my master's students can't do this at this point in time. And these students were from like a private school that were a little bit sort of better off. They had teachers that had gone through our master's program, so they were like more well-trained teachers that could then show them some of the newer stuff. And so I do worry about it, but I think that it's something that, as long as we can teach people how to prompt correctly, the limitations of AI, what it can be used for, how to use it ethically, I think it can be something that can also help bring people up to speed pretty quickly. Because as Christine was mentioned, right, you can have them go and explore and get answers at midnight or 2 in the morning, and I think that's a great thing. So I think it has the potential to make things worse, but also to make things better. It's just about how we can train. And as Dr. Klopper said, I think it's really hard right now for educators to know what to do because it's changing every couple months. So you'd put an IRB and you do some research and you did it on this old thing, and now that thing's out of date and it was just 6 months ago. And so it's incredibly difficult right now.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it can go both ways, but I'm really optimistic about it leveling the playing field. I mean, on the most basic needs, students need to have a computer, they need to have an internet connection, maybe they need to have enough money to cover a monthly fee for whatever AI they want to use. And that can widen the gap if not all students have those same access. But I think, probably the most responsible area for widening the gap is going to be on how schools and universities respond to teaching AI, right? AI is not going anywhere. It's only going to get better. And I think some schools are kind of pulling back and still trying to ignore that AI is something that needs to be addressed and something that needs to be taught. And I think those students are going to be at a real disadvantage as they enter into the job market and don't have that understanding of AI, first as a tool for learning, for lifelong learning, and also as a tool of this is how now in my field AI is being used to do my job. And the other fear I have is sort of an existential crisis on the part of the students, right? Of why do I need to learn any of this if AI can do it for me? And I think that's something else we need to be concerned about as well.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the practical applications of AI. Can you share some examples of how you or your colleagues have integrated AI into statistics courses?
I'd be happy to go first on this one. We've done a couple things here. I teach some courses where we have students do simulation studies to sort of see how different statistical procedures behave. And so we've had them try to outline the simulation that they want to create using generative AI. And that's been pretty successful. And it sort of takes them from worrying so much about the syntax of what they're doing to thinking bigger picture of how do I want to design the simulation so I can understand what's happening and what's going to, affect this term that I'm caring about, or this test that I'm looking into, or this confidence interval that I'm constructing. And then another thing that some colleagues in some other departments have done, and they've said they've had great success with, is having them have AI write a paper or an essay on something, and then having them go in and actually verify it and fact check it and rewrite it and sort of document that whole process. And in that way, you also teach them that this thing is not necessarily going to give you the right answer all the time. And I think that's one thing that I really worry about. Dr. Arcari, you keep mentioning that I've been wanting to say something about this. I know we're going to talk about limitations later, but I do worry about not knowing when it's giving the right answer and when it's not, right? Because I've typed in some things that I'm an expert on, and so I can tell that it's wrong because I'm an expert on it. But when people are learning, I really do worry about them thinking whatever it says is always right. And so I think it's really important that we sort of think about it more as like a thing to get them started, to then go and say, okay, I want to go and look up more about this from a reputable source so they can make sure that it's correct.
Thank you.
Some of what we've implemented. One thing that we really want to look at is this idea of uploading your course material through one of the pilot projects that we have, as Christine has mentioned, and write the injection prompts so that the students are guided properly. We do see the prompts that the students write. We do see their output. Now we've done that across a couple of courses, and we really want to also investigate the quality of the material that went into the model and the type of material that went into the model. For instance, is it going to make a very big difference if the material is heavy with mathematical typesetting? How's the model going to respond to that? If the course material contains a lot of code, if that's a documentation that contains a lot of code, how would the model handle that? So we're really interested just to see across the various courses and across the various types of content that we have uploaded, and we are partnering with one of the large companies with us to look at then how the model would respond to the students. So not only the students' use of it, but how the models interact as well. Fortunately, there we do always have regular updates, so that we do have access, or the students through this program does have access to the newest models, and so we're hoping we don't fall too far behind in that. Some of the other things that we have tried, of course, NotebookLM from Google, I think, is fantastic. Some of the courses that I teach, Introduction to Health Data Science, the first couple of weeks is very heavy, just with normal content it's just verbose content. We're talking about IRBs, we're talking about biases in data sets, etc. So that kind of course material is very dense, just with text. And the notebook tool, obviously, creating that little podcast for students. The students absolutely, most of them absolutely love that. So we're experimenting with that. And the great thing about that is we do allow the students then to come and give feedback on that response. And since they all have the same input, they're all going to get a slightly different output. And during those discussions, it gives the students some idea of having to listen to another student, what the LLM told them, what they got from that. And that is at least some opportunity of catching some of these hallucinations, some of these mistakes, and just having that in the open discussion. And I think for us, that's a great learning experience as far as realizing how accurate this tool can be and when and how it hallucinates. So that's some of the projects that we have at the moment.
Thank you very much. And there are several AI-driven tools like ChatGPT, Grammarly, and so on. And how can AI-driven tools enhance student engagement and active learning?
Okay, this is one of my favorite topics of conversation, so I'll start off with this one. And we've talked about how this can, the benefits for the students with personalized learning experiences and AI tutoring. But I really want to talk a little bit about the instructors, the faculty that are teaching this course. And faculty time is so valuable. And ChatGPT is the one I typically use, but AI can really come in and help with content creation for your course. Developing, helping you develop your syllabus, your learning objectives, customized test questions, quizzes, learning materials, and asking specifically about learning materials with active learning principles. And one thing I tell my faculty over and over again, whenever you're stuck on something, ask ChatGPT. See what they come up with. And again, it's part A, it's the starting point, it's the generation of ideas. We talked about, for example, how, ChatGPT and other AI can be really good as tutors, creating study guides. Okay, so think about this. Think about tasking your students. Task them with creating a comprehensive study guide on a specific topic. Study guide is going to be a tool for them and their peers to prepare for an upcoming exam. That's really, important that they know it's going to be shared with their peers because that's going to up their performance. And, say this is not just about gathering information, it's about demonstrating a deep understanding of the material and thinking critically about how to communicate it. So send them to ChatGPT or whatever AI, say, develop a study guide, show me what ChatGPT came up with, because I'm going to compare that to the final product. So I want to see your growth. What ChatGPT provided is point A. I want to see how you developed the study guide. I want to see how you fact-checked the study guide. So now you take something that would be, maybe in some ways almost considered cheating, that they went to ChatGPT and asked to, create a study guide to making it into a more of a critical thinking experience for the student. So and there's so many ways to do that. And then as a matter of fact, you can say, like, this is my assignment. I'm going to have them do the study guide and then ask ChatGPT to create a rubric, right? And then now you have a rubric for the study guide as well. And again, whether it's students or whether it's the teachers working with ChatGPT, it's always the starting point, right? I mean, you just took 5 hours of, time that it would take you to kind of develop the concept and bring it to completion. And now you've probably just taken that from 5 hours down to an hour.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dr. Arkari. Any other comments before we move on? So with use of AI tools also comes ethical concerns. So how do you navigate ethical concerns when using AI to teach statistics? For example, we already talked about errors in some AI-generated examples or results, or even over-reliance on AI tools.
I'll get going. I think, Justin, you mentioned, you mentioned using the Visual Studio Code, the Copilot. I fully support that. I think that you're absolutely spot on with that one, and it sounds like you've had a lot of success with that. One of the things that I feel we are very fortunate in in the STEM field as far as AI is concerned, specifically when it comes to the generation of solutions pertaining to equations or pertaining to code. It's very easy to see whether the response from the AI works, specifically if it is code. The code will execute or it will not. So I'm not going as far as saying, well, it might be code that executes, but there's something wrong. The wrong function was used, the wrong function was called, etc., or the arguments were not quite right, even though it will generate, the code will run. But I think we're in a very fortunate position in different fields of STEM that we can almost immediately test the output. And I'm slightly, I feel very fortunate in that sense that I'm not in health policy or something that's much more to do with psychology and the humanities way, that you really have to look at this output very carefully. So in that sense, I feel we're very fortunate, and I tend to find myself enjoying the courses where I use AI that does lead to code generation, and we can immediately verify that output was correct. And fortunately for us in statistics, specifically in introductory statistics, when it comes to students in various forms of healthcare, when it comes to those introductory things, of course, we try to reinforce. If we think about exploratory data analysis, there's going to be the summary statistics, there's going to be the data visualization, and those things have to tell the same story. And so even in that sense, it reinforces what the student's learning, but they can also almost immediately verify what the large language model told them. So in that sense, I really feel fortunate. I think we are a tad luckier than someone in other fields of study.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think with coding especially, it's so great because you do just immediately get to test whether what it spit out to you is correct or not. And then that's where it comes to the critical thinking where, okay, well, this wasn't right, but maybe this is the start of something where I just need to fix this one part. And maybe I can actually ask it to fix that part and say, hey, this part I don't think is right. Can you give me an alternative way to do that? And so, yeah, I think it's wonderful in our field for that purpose because it's so easy to know whether it's right or wrong, generally speaking. And so I do love the idea that Dr. Akari mentioned that it should always be a starting point, right? This idea generator to get you going to help you to deal with that, because we need to teach our students that there is a big problem with it being right and wrong. I think the BBC just put out an article a little bit ago. They had their news correspondents review 100 news articles and then AI summaries of them. And they said that they did 4 different common generative AIs, and all for the 4 of them, the best that they did was 60% accuracy in terms of summarizing it without a big factual mistake. And I think Apple just recently turned off their AI news summaries due to hallucinations that were just completely wrong about summarizing their articles. And so teaching students that these things are not right all the time, I think that's what's really important, is making sure that they understand it's going to give you something. It's a starting point. It's something to think about. We actually need to do the critical thinking ourselves and double check things.
Thank you very much. And let's talk a little bit about challenges and limitations that we alluded to a little while ago. Do you worry that students may rely too much on AI without developing critical thinking skills or deepening their understanding of their subject?
Yes. Although I have to say, over my decades of teaching, I've really seen diminished critical thinking skills. And that, the last 10 years, 15 years of that can't be attributed to AI. So honestly, I think we have larger problems. I think the ability to obtain quick answers from the internet or worse, social media, and that is really contributing to surface level understanding and a superficial grasp of concepts. So I don't think we can just blame AI on this loss of critical thinking. I don't think as in academia, we've paid enough attention to developing critical thinking skills among our students or demanding critical thinking skills among our students. And we can use AI to help us create that active learning, authentic learning experiences. Students, again, they need to understand the capabilities and limitations of AI. They need to learn how to use AI, not just as a tool, as a tool, but also for critical thinking. And again, going back, that students have to learn that AI is a starting point. it's not an ending point. So I really don't want to, throw AI under the bus with critical thinking. I think that's a problem with the way that we do our education. And I think this is actually a really good excuse to be much more reflective about how we're teaching our students and incorporating AI into that teaching of our students.
The big thing for me that this is brought on is related to the teaching, but it's actually the assessing of students. So how do we actually create meaningful assessments that are going to get at the things that we want our students to learn and the things that we want our students to be able to do when they leave our courses? And so I started to do a lot more oral exams and oral discussions of things, and that's been interesting. Just because of our larger class sizes, it makes it very difficult to do. But that's something that I've tried. I've gone to a lot more concept question-based exams. So even in a class, I'm teaching a statistical learning course this semester, and it's all about machine learning methods and those things. My exam is completely concept questions. It's just, what would you do here? Why do you do this? What is the benefit of doing this method? So none of it is computation-based. None of it is, actually implement this model on this thing. That's what homework's for. That's when you can use ChatGPT and these things to make your life easy. I want to know that you understand what you're doing so you can actually think about these things, weigh them in your mind and whatnot. So I really think assessment is an important way to help us with that critical thinking. That is definitely a struggle.
Absolutely, Justin. And I have to say, like, one of the best strengths of ChatGPT or other AI is asking them again to help you create these active learning experiences within your class. Like, I'm an epidemiologist by training. So I, go in and I tap, I want an active learning experience assignment to give to my students on the concept of measures of morbidity and mortality. And, within seconds, you have, it generated 15 really fantastic ideas of how to take, instead what a student would do is come and just fill out a formula like, here's the incidence in this population, here's the prevalence, instead of just, doing these straight calculations, really engaging the students in something greater for the assessment. So absolutely. And ChatGPT is such a fantastic way to start exploring some ideas of how you can do that.
I almost want to say, Christine, I think you said one of the most important things that we have spoken about before, saying there is our academic view of it, how we're dealing with the students at the moment, but when they are going to be in the job market one day. And then the critical thinking, obviously, or a lack of it, is really going to come out. If you're going to struggle there, it's one thing to get yourself, pass some exam, and you get your degree at the end or your certificate at the end. But when you enter the job market, critical thinking is really going to be in your face. You really will have to do the job. And that was what you had said there for me, really hit home, thinking about sometimes we concentrate too much on what we're doing here in academia, but thinking about what would these students have to do when they leave our hallowed four walls of academia. And but this exploration, as you mentioned, giving them this opportunity in almost designing their own education. They are now partaking in their own education. And I think that for me is one of the beauties and success. But I really want to take, to think a bit harder about how are we really preparing them and how are their skills going to measure up against people who are already in the workforce when they do enter that workforce. I think, Christine, that was such an important thing.
Yeah, and I think this is an area that we are really, we're already behind on, right? This is all brand new and we're already behind on it because the people are out there, we're kind of sitting here in academia, reading about this. And meanwhile, in health departments across the United States, they're using AI now to interpret their surveillance data, where before we were teaching our students, like, how do you look at a surveillance report and interpret it? And now the goal is, how am I going to ask AI to look at this and interpret it? And what concerns does that, what are the pros and cons to doing that? And what does AI need to be considering? And that, again, is, that would be a really great assignment.
Agreed.
Talking about assignments, sometimes AI can also, or many times it can generate incorrect answers. How can educators train students to be cognizant of this, that AI can generate incorrect answers? And how can educators ensure that AI assisted learning remains accurate and reliable?
I think what Jay mentioned earlier, where he had multiple people within the same class do the same prompt and then compare it. So teaching students that this is going to be, it's going to give you different answers, and sometimes they will be right and sometimes they will be wrong. I think that is by far the most important thing there. Again, it's a starting point, like Christine said. Starting point, think about it. What are we going to do with it from there?
I think really there's so many ways in assignments, you can do that first draft assignment where a student does a draft of the assignment, uses AI for that, and then they have to, show you what that draft is, report on the questions that they had on that draft. Like, I think AI was maybe wrong here. This is why I think it's wrong. These are the resources I went to confirm that this was correct or it actually was wrong. So I think there's a lot of ways to incorporate into your assignments or scaffolding assignments so they have that step to go through.
So talked about how AI can enhance personalization, and sometimes AI requires student information for personalization. So what data privacy issues should educators consider when using AI for such personalization needs?
I think this is so important and something that I'm really hammering home with our faculty. You have to have an AI policy in your syllabus. We require it. Okay, fortunately, I'm not at a university that says this is your AI policy, right? Every instructor gets to select their own AI policy. And an AI policy works two ways, right? It's both how the student can use AI and also how the instructor is using AI. Okay, that transparency really has to happen in both ways. You also, when you're using any of your student data or student work and you're running it through AI, I treat all of that like I treat PHI, so protected health information. Names, addresses, social security numbers, not that they're going to have that on their assignments, account numbers, whatever it is. I make sure if I'm putting anything into AI, it's going to be strict. Because the thing with AI is, what you put into AI is going to teach the model how to perform. Right? So that's what you put in can somehow be shared in some way out the other end for somebody else's search. One thing you need to do is encourage your university to create enterprise accounts. So we're seeing more and more universities doing that. And when you're creating an enterprise account, they should be saying as part of that enterprise account that they don't want anything being used for training models. Some of the paid versions of like ChatGPT, you can go in there and you can actually click an option saying, do not use what I'm putting in to train a model. So you really need to understand what AI you're working with, what their policies are, and making sure whatever you put in is has any kind of identifying information stripped off of it. So that's what I'm doing that I feel like I can comfortably live with in that realm.
Yeah, that's a great point about having an AI policy for the class.
The AI policy is key because, one of the things that everybody screams about with AI is the cheating, right? And you have to have the AI policy. And this is what is, allowed for the students to do. This is what is prohibited for the students to do. And this is what it means for academic integrity, right? So those are the three primary parts that you really need in your AI policy to be sent out. You can also, one of the things that's kind of fun to do on the first day of classes, have your students write the AI policy. Say, these are the three things I wanted the AI policy. You don't give them the final say. At the final say is yours at the end of the day, right? But ask them to write their AI policy, what they think that should look like. Let them get that buy-in for them. And then sometimes we also think that we need an AI policy just for like a course, right? Well, AI policy can change depending on the course. And so for example, coding, for teaching coding, maybe you want them using AI, maybe you don't want them using AI, right? So it could change by the course, but also be prepared to change your AI policy by the assignment as well, right? You have to understand like what's your do not cross line. And that might vary by your courses you teach, it may vary by the assignments. So you just need to be very, very clear, because down the road, if you have problems with AI and especially, you know, uses of AI by the students that you think are cheating, then if you don't have that clear policy to go back to, it's really hard to move forward.
Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other comments?
I was going to be curious, and if you allow me a question, would be, thinking about local installations, if anyone has that kind of compute power to run open source models locally to such an extent that a large number of students can actually make use of it, and the system doesn't fall over because it does not have the bandwidth or the memory capacity to deal with the larger of the open source models, compared to trusting companies by a checkbox that they will not make use of the students. It's a big trust, and there's obviously trust issues when it comes to corporations. I'm going to trust them and give them the benefit of the doubt, but the exploring open source models, local installations of that to such an extent, or with the compute power that it is actually usable in a closed environment. I'm curious as if to anyone is going that direction, or if it is worthwhile just to sign contracts with these large companies.
I'm not aware of anybody going in that direction, but it's certainly interesting. You know, one of the things I hear a lot, one of the concerns about faculty, because I always like, you know, put in your exam questions and see what the answers look like, because then you'll know what to be looking for when your students turn in work, right? And they're like, I don't want to do that. Well, I can guarantee you, if you have more than 5 students in your course, somebody is putting that exam question into AI, right? I mean, this idea that the students aren't going to do this, the students are absolutely doing this. So your exam questions, they are there. They are in AI. Don't let that stop you from putting your own stuff in.
True. Very true.
Thank you. So let's think about like a forward-looking and views for the future. How do you see AI evolving and guiding statistics education in the next 3 or 5 years? It's a big picture type of a viewpoint.
I think we have been more on top of how to use AI in the classroom, right? I think there's more and more every day coming out, you know, people experimenting. But I think where we are really falling short right now, I've mentioned this before, is how do we teach our students to use AI in the workplace? And this is more complicated than it seems. First of all, we have to know how AI is being used in the workplace. So you have to have a really good connection to the workplace, where your students are heading off to figure out how they're using AI. But you can't just go and, you know, redesign a course every year, right? And so we have to learn how to be a little more flexible with our courses and how to adapt to these rapid changes. And also we have to figure out how to do a better job of understanding what is actually changing in the workplace.
Yeah, I think like we mentioned before, this stuff is really changing how we teach coding. And I think there's a question in the Q&A about how are we supposed to teach students to code in R, for example, if they can just use GitHub Copilot now. And so I think it switches from teaching the syntax and worrying about them getting it exactly right to teaching the concepts and make sure they can understand and then troubleshoot. So can you understand the types of things that we do to a data set to get it ready for an analysis? Okay, so now we can have the program do this for us. And then if it gets stuck or it makes a mistake, we need to know how to look at the help for that file or for that function. We need to be able to teach them how they can go through that process of fixing whatever issue is there. So really a focus more on the problem solving and the logic behind things rather than the syntax and worrying about those little things. And then of course, as Christine mentioned, you know, this idea about how you do it in the workplace, I think it's going to change the application of statistics to some degree that maybe even if you weren't an expert on statistics, but you have some background in it, you're able to have more questions answered for you and more ideas generated for you before you would maybe talk to a statistician. So people might be coming to a statistician with more well-rounded questions. And so we need to be ready to explore and discuss those things with them.
Definitely for me, I'm always cognizant of resource constrained environments. Not only, not everyone works in the first world with access to biostatisticians. There are many parts in the world with dire healthcare problems who have to come up with their own solutions. They have a scarcity of resources. One of the biggest scarcity is biostatisticians. And I think we might now see many more healthcare solutions being found because people are empowered by this tool. Whereas before they were totally, I think they were totally removed from the ability to find solutions for some healthcare problems by even the most rudimentary type of data analysis, which now is becoming more available. So I think this democratization of the ability to work with data is a very important thing. And I'm curious to see what solutions are going to come from various parts of the globe. So for me, that is very important. But as far as the future is concerned, I want to be very nerdish and saying, quote Yoda on this and say, always in motion, the future is, for those who know that quote. So, and I think it's not more true for anything other than AI, as new models just get introduced all the time. What's going to happen next week, next month, next year? I think we would all agree that'd be very difficult to predict. But I'm very optimistic, and it's a pleasure to hear from the other panelists as well how deeply they thought about and how engaged they are with it, how they're not retreating from it, how they're standing at the forefront of it. So that's been very exciting for me to hear this as well. And I think that's where all the universities really have to be in this in this position. So I'm very, very, very exciting to hear this from everyone here at least.
Yeah, and what training do faculty need to integrate AI into their teaching if we are to prepare students for the workforce, and that faculty also need to go through relevant training? What might those be?
I hope that everybody, is at a university that has, teaching resources, whether it's some type of a teaching academy or resource center for teaching. And, I would expect that those types of groups within universities are really on top of the use of AI, but not everybody has that type of access to those types of resources. There's also, if you're thinking more like on the department level or on the school level, sometimes, my own university, a lot of the resources are very centric to undergraduate education and less so to graduate education, right? So sometimes it's really helpful to find somebody out there who has the skills you need to be able to bring them in for a workshop, or, Zoom is really helpful now. You can do a lot of things over Zoom as well. But the number one thing that I tell my faculty, if there's something that you're stuck on, just get in there and try it yourself. There's so much information online about, prompt engineering for ChatGPT. I could care less about prompt engineering, right? There are some very specific things I want to do where I have very specific prompts that I use, but I speak in broken English, I misspell. ChatGPT figures out what I'm asking, right? But sometimes, I might be, okay, I'm putting together a syllabus and I need a rubric, the curriculum committee is going to ask me this and I don't know where to start. I have a couple of basic prompts I use to generate a rubric, for example. How can I make this assignment more engaging? What questions can I ask during my lecture to get discussion going among the students? These are all questions that ChatGPT can really kind of come to the rescue with and save you a lot of time and energy to do it. So number one, just get in there and start using it.
Such an important point, Christine. So it's showing people how it can help them first, right, before helping someone else. We are fortunate we have a university-wide working group with experts. I'm going to call them experts, as I say, that's a very dangerous and loaded thing to do with something that's so brand new, but at least people are very engaged with it from all the schools on this working group. And one of the main aims of this is regular workshops for faculty. And so we go from school to school, all the time with these workshops, and it's not instructive workshops, it's discussion workshops to understand where the pain points are, to showcase how it might help the faculty first, and thereby empowering them to engage and help with the students. So I think, I mean, being at a university that does that, again, very fortunate, and I'm really hoping that everyone who's attending at different academic institutions just really pushes this forward at their own institutions as well.
Right. And I've seen a lot of responses among professional societies at their annual meetings, real focus on AI. And I think that's also a really great place for people to go and learn about its use.
Yeah, I'll echo everything you both said there. And then I'll just add that for me, it circles back to course design and thinking critically about how you're going to assess what you want your students to know first, and then how are you going to assess them in a meaningful way. And then how are you going to help them go from a point A, as Christine mentioned, to point B, right? And maybe that uses the AI in some cases, maybe it doesn't, being clear with your policy. So making sure that they can just understand that big picture of what it can be used for, what it can't be used for, and then what you're trying to get your students to do with it or without it.
Yeah, and I really love that point A to point B, because what I found kind of over the years, I feel like it's kind of gotten worse, is, you give an assignment, and I will have students that, get the assignment, and they end up where I want them to end up with the assignment. And then I have other students, and they've come to me and they're like, I spent 15 hours on this assignment, and where are they? They're at point A. And how do I grade that, right? Because they didn't get to where they spent all this time, and all they did was basically rehash what I gave them. And, so oftentimes with assignments, ChatGPT, everybody starts at point A. Go ask ChatGPT. Everybody has the same starting point. And now it's a lot easier for assessment to see how students followed up on that starting point.
And there may also be educators who are hesitant to use AI. Do you have any recommendation or any message on what steps can they take to experiment with integrating AI into teaching statistics in the health sciences?
Just do it. Experiment, right? Start off by taking your syllabus and putting your syllabus through AI and asking AI how your syllabus can be better, right? Start from the very beginning. Take every assignment that you have and put it through AI and say, how can I test these skills? What are some ideas? And especially add in for active learning. Just play around with it. Just get in there and do it.
I think
you don't
having
have to-
them,
Yeah, you don't have to change
Yeah.
everything all at once, right? You have 5 assignments in your class. Start with one. Start with the first one and put that in, because then people are like, all this active learning and it's so hard to grade. It's so much extra grading for me, right? You don't have to make all these changes at once. Just pick one thing and go in and try it.
and I'll say, recommend that they would poll the students on how many of them are using it already. So like they wouldn't have an idea that, look, almost everybody's doing it anyway. So we need to think about it. We need to actually go into there.
I don't want to underplay how difficult it might be for the individuals who are not early adopters. People are busy, faculty are busy, they're busy with committee work, they're busy with research. People are busy, it's difficult to find the time. And once you feel like you are behind, that feeling that I need to catch up with this can be an enormous undertaking. And I love what I've heard now saying, just start with a small thing. Just get going with it, and you will pick it up. And I sort of love that approach. But I do feel the pain of some of the faculty, because I think many of us are truly overburdened, and just creating that personal space where you feel you can do this exploration. Specifically, as I say, you now move into a lecture situation where the student body knows more than you know. That's also a very uncomfortable position to be in, whereas you've always been in a position of authority. And I think that has to be talked about as well, and it has to be addressed. But it's finding that just that first thing to do, as you both have mentioned, and seeing how that can be of benefit to you. But I don't want to underplay how busy individuals are, how overloaded some of them are, and how they really have other responsibilities. than doing this as well. I really want to address that as well. And how do we set aside some time and a space for people to start that exploration?
Jay, I couldn't agree more. And that's where, my advice comes up with the faculty. When you are encountering a problem, when you are frustrated because something is taking you more time than it should, turn to ChatGPT. Sometimes we've all spent 8 hours, right, trying to respond to a student email and make sure it's just the right response, right? I mean, whatever, if you feel it's taking you too long, if you feel you don't have time to do it, turn to ChatGPT. I don't care if it's writing an email or something with your course. I tell my faculty, put your course evaluations into ChatGPT. Some people don't like to read their course evaluations. You know what? ChatGPT does a great job with course evaluations. It'll give you a summary. And then you can kind of read the course evaluation out of the context of thinking like a student wrote this versus this is just the summary of it. So there's a lot of uses there, but if they're stuck on something, that's the best time to try it.
Sure.
So I do want to just push back a little bit there. Thinking about that BBC article about, they summarized 100 news articles and 40% of them, they had major factual issues. So, I've heard of people, I'm not going to say at my university, but somewhere using this to go through faculty comments on people that we're interviewing. And to me, that seems like not the place for this, right? Because this is something that is very private, and it's very important information, right? It's not like something where it's okay if it's a little bit wrong, right? If it gets something very wrong, that's a big issue. So I do just want to push back a little there.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of talk about using AI right now in admissions. I mean, we've talked about that as well. Do we just have AI look at admissions? And there always has to be that is not, the answer is no, right? There's too many nuances with admissions. If you want AI to be, a first pass, and you keep that to yourself, right now, for example, is there a way we have 2 faculty look at every application? And then if they disagree, then we bring in a 3rd faculty, right? So now we have 2 to 3 faculty looking at every application. Is there a way to have, train AI on our applications and have 1 faculty look at it? And then if that faculty and AI disagree, then we bring in a 2nd faculty. Is there a way to do that? So you have to be really careful, but absolutely, you can't trust, that's part of the critical thinking, right? You can't trust AI for everything.
Well, no, I'll push back on the pushback. And if we think of the field of healthcare, we do know that some of these algorithms for a long time, even before transformer models came along, could outperform the diagnostic skills of clinicians. And the point being is, should you allow AI to be a second opinion in the healthcare setting? And that's been a point of debate for some time. If you have demonstrated through proper research that this algorithm can do better at finding fine diagnoses and CT scans, should you allow a human to look at the CT scan anymore, or should an AI be that second opinion? And should a patient have the right to insist on an AI being the second opinion? These are all sort of important questions. And sometimes I do want to wonder, maybe the AI would do a better job than adding all the human emotions and hormones and chemicals that swirl around in this bag of biology that we call humanity. And sometimes perhaps it will do better. I'm just putting it out there, but obviously the point is there. I think with admissions, I fully agree with that. But I think some other time it'll clip everything that we can do. And I think that's just the natural order of things. And sometimes I look forward to that day, and sometimes I do not.
That brings us to our existential crisis, right? Are we all going to be replaced by AI?
Well, I'm going to put it out there boldly. Yes, we are. And I think it is part and parcel of the evolution of life. That there's always been improvement. And is this our natural improvement? Do we reach a mental endpoint beyond which we cannot move because of the limitations of our biology? And are we designing our own replacement? And can you look at that positively? Do we spend time now in making sure that our replacement, if we want to go there with this existential crisis, is going to do a better job than we have? Because certainly there are many ways that humanity has failed. As opposed to all the good we've done, there's also some bad. But that is now getting well beyond the point. But those are really the interesting discussions, aren't they?
Yeah, this definitely has been a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure we can talk a lot more about this AI use today and in the future. But I want to say a very big thank you to Dr. Carey, Klopper, and Post, and for your insights and the wonderful discussions. I want to also take us a little bit to questions or comments from our audience. I see one, there were two, I think we answered one, we'll come back to it if needed in a moment. There is one unanswered one yet, from Karabi Nandi. What are your suggestions for assessment approaches for online courses where everything is virtual? I'm assuming this question is about assessment for asynchronous or online courses. Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I've lived in the online space for many years now. So I would say you have kind of two major options. One would be to really think about your assessments and make them meaningful above and beyond what AI can do anyway. And you can also do things like track how the student progresses through the assignment. So you can use things like Google Docs where you can leave tracking on and see how they add to the document, see where they make changes. And so you can sort of do it as a whole procedure there where you're looking at their learning process as they go. And the other option is to have proctored exams as well. And so we do some of that here where we will, like I said, I'll do a lot of concept-based stuff on our proctored exams, and we'll say, come in without help of anything. I want to know that you know this stuff. Answer these 10 questions that are short answer kind of essay style stuff.
And you can also in the online space use like lockdown browsers and cameras. So they're showing you their work area, and you can make sure they're not going and Googling answers anywhere. I think some other things sometime where they have, you know, whether it's in-person classes or online classes, they're working on a take-home assignment that they're working on, and maybe then to follow up the next day with just like one or two questions, just like a really quick check, so for statistics, they have to, run all these calculations, right? But they're coming in the next day, and then you're asking them, okay, well, interpret this coefficient, or kind of ask them on spot things where it's really demonstrating that they understand it versus they just kind of copied the equation and the answer that they got on from AI.
I will just reiterate or just support what everyone has said so far. There's one thing I just want to circle back to. Justin, you had mentioned that, and that is oral exams. Now, if that is possible in the virtual world, if that's possible for you to set up, but I really want to support this idea of oral exams. Now, I am very biased. I come from a background. At least one of the things that I studied was heavily reliant upon oral exams. You had to appear in front of a whole room full of people, and they just peppered you with questions face to face, and those were daunting times. So I'm biased towards that, but I want to really reiterate that idea of speaking to people face to face, whether that's virtual or live, or in person, I should say. I really wanted just to come back to that. When you had mentioned that, really the lights went up for me, and I'm really doing that as well. And I really want to, if you haven't tried that before, anyone in the audience, try to do oral exams. They really give you such a good insight into the way that the student's thinking, how they've constructed that version of the knowledge in their, to themselves. It's a if it is possible for you to do, it's a very, very enriching experience.
Yeah, and sometimes I love that idea too. Sometimes it's really hard to do when you have a class of 20, 30, 40 plus students do oral exams. But you can also we do this a lot online in our online teaching, that they have to do they have to record themselves doing a video presentation, right? So they upload that video, and then you can actually use AI to help you grade the video, right? So you can run the video through AI, ask AI to summarize like what they thought were the strong points, the weak points, maybe, what's wrong. And again, you don't use that information to grade, but it really speeds up the grading, right? Because you can see what, AI spit out, looked it over, and now what, helps you know what to listen for. So instead of maybe listening to the presentation 3 or 4 times to give a final grade, you're listening to it once or twice and you've had that guidance.
Good.
We have a question from Carol Bigelow. If a student is brand new to a discipline, I worry that they will not be able to fact check an AI response or report. And then they would have trouble creating a study guide. What are your suggestions?
I think, if they're creating they're creating a study guide on the material that you have taught them, right? So they need to be able to teach that material back at the level that they were taught to, maybe providing a little insight in there. I mean, one of the things when you do this process with the study guide, I mean, part of it is that it's a graded exercise, right? So they do the studies, they do the study guide, and you're grading them on like, redo that, this is wrong, this isn't quite right. So you can decide how you want to do that, send it back to them and have them try again, or just kind of grade it on them and take off points on the grading. I mean, I think what they create is not going to be the stuff, it will not be the final study guide that goes out to the students. It still has to be reviewed first by the instructor. But I think part of the learning experience is using AI and seeing, what is right and what's wrong. Because I believe there's patterns in that, right? And really what they should be doing, the study guide gets spit out, they should be going back to their textbook, to maybe they have an extra textbook on the side. They should be going back to their course notes to kind of confirm everything that's in the study guide. Like that's the whole point of it, that they're going through everything and checking on it.
I really want to support what Christine is saying there. It's so important. I always, when I do these workshops, I tell faculty, it's obviously, I mean, this is just obvious. It's very different to interact with a large language model in a topic in which you are an expert, as opposed to a topic in which you know nothing. If you are unconsciously incompetent, I do love those 4 stages of unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, etc. If you are unconsciously incompetent, you don't even know what to write in that prompt. You have no idea. Now, for me, always the thing about paying money to go to university is some professor, some lecturer has sat down and they have thought deeply about what should go, what should the content be. It takes an expert to put that together. This is like a pyramid scheme almost. You have to have this knowledge before we go to the next chapter, before we go to the next chapter. And sometimes that's difficult to put together. But someone has already done that for you. That's part, for me, of what you're paying for. Someone has thought deeply about how do we construct or how do we put together a plan to do this. Now, so I really love what Christine is saying here, is saying, can you create a study guide for me? Can you come up with this? And what I have told students before, and now this is more in other work, working with research students, etc., is just thinking about taking a textbook or a couple of textbooks, taking that content, the content pages, putting that into an LLM and say, can you come up with? So I'm trying to guide. Someone's already thought that, someone's already written that textbook. That would be the same as sitting to think, what's the content going to be? What's week 1 or chapter 1, chapter 2 going to be? And build the study guide for me. Somewhere along the line, someone has had to think about this. But I do love what you're saying, Christine, is this, get them to do it themselves and then look at that response. But certainly I do always advise someone, sit down with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and try to engage in a topic in which you know nothing and see what that experience is like. And it's only when you've gone through that yourself that you get some idea of what a student who's brand new to a discipline is going through. And it's very difficult to understand sometimes, just from human nature, why is the student struggling with this? It's very difficult to put yourself back into that position of unconscious incompetence. So for me, it's always a worthwhile experience. Sometimes I take something that I haven't done for a decade or more. Maybe I do some real analysis, or topology or whatever. Even there, when I have to think about this again before I can just come up with that proof, get the LLM or just try something that you know nothing about and see how far you can get and see what those struggles are. That for me is sometimes illuminating. I've tried that experience a couple of times, just to have that feeling of how difficult it can be to engage with an LLM.
I think you could also demonstrate it in a smaller version in like a 5 or 10-minute setting in your class too. So if you're like, I want to summarize today's lecture or this first week of class, I want to summarize it. Let's talk about how we could do that with this large language model, and then show them how you'd go about verifying the information that it spit out versus the notes that you had. And so actually demonstrating that process could also help if the worry is more that they don't know how to use the ChatGPT or whatever generative AI.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been such a wonderful and informative session. And we don't have any more Q&A in the Q&A session. So I want to give a big thank you, Dr. Arcari, Dr. Klopper, and Dr. Post for participating in this panel and for sharing your wonderful thoughts with us. This has been so wonderful. And we are very grateful for your time and discussion points. And also a big thank you to our audience for joining us today and for your excellent questions. And I also want to share with you that the recording of this webinar will be available to you soon. And for more information, please do take a look at our section's webpage, blog page, and also our resource page. The links and the QR codes to these links you see on the screen now. And once again, with a very big thank you to our panelists and a very big thank you to our webinar coordinator, Darcy, and to our audience. Thank you and goodbye.